Happy lunch hour, notaries. Thanks very much for joining us. Really delighted today to have Diane Durham presenting to us on technology and changes that we're seeing for notarial practices. And Nikesh, who's the Chief Product Officer, Marcy, Conveyancing Product Specialist with Diane Durham. Thanks so much for your time today to present to notaries, and thanks to Diane Durham for your ongoing sponsorship and support of the BC Notaries Association and of the profession. We're super pleased that you provided us with your time today. Trista, I'll turn it to you if you want to do some introductions, some formal introductions, and then I'll get it out of everybody's way on the screen here.
Perfect. Thanks, Chad. Thank you, Nikesh and Marcy, for joining us. We appreciate the partnership we have with Diane Durham with the BC Notaries, so thank you. And notaries, as always, thank you for joining us on your lunch hour. I know that you registered today, so with that registration and attendance, we will do a draw after this session is over. I will do it on the computer, plug everyone's name in for 2 tickets to the BC Lions game for October 17th, and the winner will be notified this afternoon. So good luck to everyone with that. Q&A, as usual, pop them into the Q&A box, and Nikesh and Marcy will address those at the end of the presentation. So as Chad mentioned, we have Nikesh Patel, Chief Product Officer. Nikesh has extensive experience building innovative, customer-focused product organizations. Most recently at Nielsen, Nikesh spearheaded a transformative overhaul of Nielsen's digital measurement business during a time of profound industry change, accelerating top-line growth while repositioning product strategy and architecture for the streaming era and evolving privacy regulations. And also Marcy Henderson, Conveyancing Product Specialist. Based in BC, Marcy started her career as a legal assistant specializing in real estate and conveyancing for over 20 years before moving into the legal software industry. Her journey from legal practice into sales, support, and now product has given her a unique perspective on both the challenges and opportunities in BC conveyancing. So over to you, Nikesh. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Chad and Trista. So to dive right in, I'll try to leave about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. So hopefully we have a good discussion. Trista already introduced me, so I won't spend a lot of time on myself. But one thing I will highlight is my background really is in analytics and in some ways like marketing and advertising. And when I was thinking about the content for this presentation, there's a lot of opportunities when people talk about technology and about disruption that unfortunately, it can fall down a path of people talking about AI for 60 minutes. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to talk to you about things that I think are a lot more practical, things that I think you can start using or employing almost in your day-to-day practice, as soon as possible. So I hope that this is maybe not what you expected in terms of it. We're not going to bore you about robots and about Gen AI, but instead about things that are a little bit more down to earth. So I hope the content is relevant for you. To get started, the frame for the discussion today is really around three things, which is when I think about how technology is impacting kind of the notarial practice or really kind of professional services generally, you have to actually start not with the technology itself, but start with your customer. Because if you think about it, like the way that we all interact with technology is changing our expectations of the different professional services that we interact with. And so if you think about, if any of you have like kids at home that grew up with, screens in front of them, maybe for better or for worse, right? They have an expectation built in around like how they interact with businesses, how they interact with applications, how they communicate. And those are all things that, yes, that is technology, but it's changing what the expectations our customers have of us. So I wanted to start there. Then we'll talk about, the meat of the discussion, which is disruptors, which is kind of new technologies, in some cases, not even technology itself, but things that involve technology and how that's impacting the practice, as well as kind of the general business environment. And then I want to leave you guys with some kind of concrete thoughts about things we can do and how we can respond to some of those disruptions. And then lastly, we'll talk about enablers, which is really focused concretely on opportunities to kind of embrace technology in your businesses to affect change. And that's not going to be reading off a litany of like names of products to you. It's really, I'm going to focus that discussion around kind of two concrete ideas that are more focused around like helping you grow your business and helping you kind of and streamline the efficiency of your existing practice. So with that frame, let's dive right in. As I mentioned, starting with the customer is really how I kind of frame most of these problems. And I thought that the most kind of straightforward, kind of streamlined way to kind of orient this discussion is really around two paths, which is one, the customer journey, which is how kind of our clients make their way to us. And the second is about their experience, like after they're in the door, after they're working with us, like how do we interact with them? What is the experience they leave with? Because obviously that has impact on their likelihood of returning to use our services. So starting with kind of the customer journey, I wanted to call out some examples of kind of like technology firms that I think do this well. Um, uh, we all obviously know companies like Yelp, but ZocDoc is a company from the States that helps people find healthcare professionals. Angie is the same for like kind of general contracting. I think the point here that I'm trying to drive is that the beginning of the customer journey is now shaped heavily by consumers' interaction with kind of digital first services. Um, and if you think about that, skews towards younger demographics, certainly. But I think even for older demographics, that's still true. Like I think about my father, well into his retirement years, but he's constantly reading consumer reports. He's constantly looking at websites like The Strategist or Wirecutter to figure out product reviews. His first touch point in his journey to find professional services or even consumer products now is online versus historically he would go into a store or he would talk to his friends or maybe get a referral. Now, that's still like the majority of the business that we get in some cases is still driven by referral. That really depends on kind of like the locality that you're in and kind of nature of your business. So word of mouth is still king, but the way that credibility is established really begins with digital first touch points. And so whether that means having, refreshing your website, whether that means having like outbound content marketing, this is all methods in which we can embrace kind of the way that consumers now have expectations of interacting with our practices and using kind of digital platforms and digital experiences to kind of like meet them where they're at. That's the first kind of thought. The second is around the customer experience. So this is after someone's already working with you. Like what do they take away from that experience? And I think that if you look at the majority of the trends around kind of the on-demand economy, that's really primed how even not just younger demographics, even older demographics expect businesses to operate. The examples that I give here are, a little bit niche, but you kind of get the point, which is, a package tracking service, right? Like on-demand updates, constantly checking your phone. When is my mail going to arrive? It could be Uber, right? Like on-demand, an on-demand ride, also pricing transparency, the ability to schedule. These are all things that consumers have come to expect when they're interacting with services. These are consumer services, but they also apply to professional services. And so again, I think the takeaway here is how do you adapt or kind of like meet your customers where they are, which is that they have an expectation of transparency. They have an expectation of like quick, response in terms of service. And then again, on the journey side, they expect that they can understand, the scope of services that you have and build that credibility about whether you're a trusted professional or not before they even potentially talk to you. And so the kind of takeaway here is think about how, digital first services and therefore technology is impacting your customer, and therefore think about how you can adapt your business in the way you communicate with your customer to kind of meet them where they are, and kind of impress upon them why you're the kind of trusted provider for the service that you're offering. So that's the frame. I think with that, that's a good segue into kind of the meat of the discussion, but really talking about the kind of those two factors, disruptors and enablers. So let's start by talking about different technology disruptors that are kind of both in the past, but also kind of, look forward-looking, past meaning present. So the first I would start with is productized legal services. And this is beyond just DC. This is a kind of nationwide phenomenon. You could even say international phenomenon, depending on the kind of jurisdiction that we're talking about here. But there are many services which historically a consumer would go directly to a notary or maybe even to a law firm to get a particular service, that now there are discrete kind of like technology companies that have built, single fit for purpose products that they offer to a customer, generally for a fixed price or in some sort of like kind of tiered pricing model. And most of the experience for the customer is done via communication over an app. I think that good examples of this are, in the conveyancing space. This is mostly in Ontario, but you have like Deeded, which is trying to do kind of like digital first communication for the conveyancing process. Willful, I know, offers will services in BC. And there's a variety, kind of a cornucopia, if you will, of companies in this space. This is a really rich category. What's the takeaway though, as these companies try to offer like almost a completely virtual, completely digitized version of a discrete service you may offer? One thing is that, particularly with people that have like more streamlined, less complicated needs from a notary, they are going to expect price transparency first and foremost, because they can see what that price is with one of these competitors of yours. But they're also probably going to lead to long-term price compression, because these companies have technology scale benefits. They're going to be able to drive prices down. And in some cases, they may even like offshore some of the back end work to potentially notaries in market, or maybe even to people outside the country. And so they have a pricing advantage. So what does that mean for us? I think the first thing is that you got to remember how customers are finding these services. They're going online and doing a search first and foremost. This is not word of mouth from a competition perspective. It's people that are digital natives. And so if you're going to try to compete directly with these services, you also should have a digital first touch point, a place that people can find your business online. So investing in your website, investing in places where you show up, so people can, that demographic of people that are likely to be attracted to these services can still find you. The second is that there are certain things these kind of companies can't and won't do because it doesn't scale. It's not cost effective for their business, which is an opportunity for you, right? Personalize your business and your offering to a customer. Localize that offering, making it region specific, market specific, maybe even to your township. These are things which you can do to win the trust of your customer and also demonstrate to them that there's a need to work with a local notary as opposed to some like nameless, large scale, maybe even global technology firm, which is trying to offer them a discrete product. And then last thing I would say on this is use, especially if you're investing in digital first touch points, use these as an opportunity to educate your customer and then specialize on things that, again, these larger kind of like global or countrywide competitors can't do, which is that you can offer, because you have so much expertise in a specific situation with your customer, you can manage complexity in ways that these larger kind of like fit in a box firms can't do. You can also use that relationship that you've built to find other opportunities for driving business with your customer, other notarial needs. And then you can also demonstrate the value of like having an ongoing relationship with a notary, right? Because throughout your lifetime, you're going to need these services. It's something which it's better to have someone that you can call. And so I think this is like ways in which you can kind of take this fact that we're going to see a lot more of these companies, and especially as AI lowers the barrier to entry and there's going to be a lot more competition in this space. Think about how that is potentially a disruptor for your business, but there's ways you can respond. The next is really more kind of a theoretical one. It's not present day, which is that over COVID, a lot of restrictions historically on how we sign and close, particularly in the conveyancing space, were lifted, but many of those restrictions are back in place. The most notable one is obviously around land title documents. But the reason why I listed that here is because there's generally a trend, I would say even globally, to digitize the conveyancing process. Dye & Durham's a global company, and out of I have folks that I talk to in the UK, and this is a very large government trend, and I like said at a national level, and you see that over time, I expect some of those same waves and motivations to play out, across a lot of regions. And I think that BC is no different in that respect. And so I highlight it because there's no impact today. And this is really just more of a signal of a trend. But in a world where the end-to-end process can all happen virtually and completely digitally, it does mean that we would face greater competition, maybe just between, firms that are in our region, but it could also lead to, greater competition from firms across the country. So what does that mean? Again, no change today, nothing imminent. But there's things we can do right now to prepare us for this eventuality if it comes to pass. A couple things. Think about how business comes to you. And I think that that's predominantly for many of us in our referral network. And so building and nurturing that referral network as a pipeline for your business is really important, because in a world where you have more competition from people that are outside your local market, having that local element of referrals is really key to maintaining your business. The second thing I'd say is, again, to the point around like the kind of level of marketing and kind of the investment that this might kind of lead into this market. Things like using AI to do things like content marketing, I think would be an opportunity to kind of get your name out there and differentiate relative to the competition. Is not something that many of us know, feel good about, or maybe even have the skills for. But it's something that I think can lower the barrier to entry and allow us to kind of be more aggressive and forthcoming in the marketing space to really build trust with customers. Those are kind of two disruptors that I would kind of highlight, kind of on different ends of the spectrum. The second two that I want to call out, though, I have to talk about AI because I'd be negligent of me to have a technology webinar not talking about AI. But the first I want to talk about actually is like digital kind of online fraud and anti-money laundering regulation. So these are different things, but I talk about them in the same breath because I think they have the same ramifications for your business. And I think the response is also kind of the same. So obviously, I think all of us, even in our personal lives, have become intimately familiar with kind of the current spectrum of online fraud, just because we probably get hundreds of spam text messages or WhatsApp messages that are trying to coax us. Hopefully we haven't fallen for any of them. But generally speaking, like things were, anytime you have a large sums of money, particularly in the conveyancing space, that are being moved, you're opening yourself up to fraud opportunities, where people are trying to inject themselves or do seller impersonation. That's a really common one. And correspondingly, there's also a growth in this is anti-AML, but really it's AML because the word A is for anti. But you have compliance obligations under AML regulation. FinTrack is a good example of this, that we have to contend with. So the point here is that whether it's because we're trying to play defense from fraud or whether we're trying to contend with the rising compliance requirements from the government, the point here is that the business risk and cost of compliance is elevated because of these trends for us. So what does that mean? I think the first thing is that there are technology solutions that can help us contend with both of these at the same time. The first I'd highlight is there's a lot of digital identity verification, kind of like know your customer, anti-money laundering services that are out there that, if adopted, can really reduce both our ongoing cost by deferring the process that we need to do for KYC and identity verification, and also make that process more efficient for our customers, for our clients, I should say. So I think that's one that I'd highlight. I think the other is that there's an opportunity to migrate away from like on-prem or desktop software to like audited, kind of like SOC 2 compliant cloud software, where you might think that by moving things off of your desktop or off of your in-office databases, you're opening yourself up to greater attack. But practically speaking, many of the companies that are in this space have much higher burdens from a security and compliance perspective, given the nature of their business. And they also have the ability to match a level of threshold from an audit and security perspective that's very hard to do in a desktop environment. So that's the other takeaway I'd have, is like think about opportunities to migrate away from desktop software to cloud software as those opportunities present themselves. The other one, obviously, is generative AI. And I think on this one, I wanted to make this specific to the notary practice because we obviously encounter this in our day-to-day lives nowadays. I think that what is the impact for all of us? I would say a couple of things. One is that it absolutely has lowered the barrier to entry for research and development that go so far into things like developing software, which is why we see a lot of those like kind of productized service companies like emerging, because it's a little bit easier to launch them. But it also means for your business, right? Like if you have to do diligence or you have obligations on the part of a customer, maybe for like a will is a good example. A lot of that, the barrier to entry for that research is much lower now. I think the other piece is that it automates the process for like reasoning and makes it so you can find optimal paths to solutions. This may not be super relevant, you think, for your business, but if there's a lot of day-to-day problems that we have to solve that you can kind of bucket into, I'm either trying to write something or I'm trying to think about something. And this is a case where, yes, there is concern around things like hallucinations and kind of the overall quality and accuracy of things that come out of Gen AI, but that gap is closing pretty rapidly, and it would be kind of foolish of us, I think, to like put our blinders on and ignore some of the trends that are happening in the market. So what does it mean for you? I know probably most of you have already started working with these tools. I would encourage you and your staff, your teams, to really experiment with them, to educate yourself on them, and particularly where you have the opportunity to use some of the paid versions of some of these tools. I'm not shilling for any of these companies, but the reason why I say that is because the paid versions are materially better than the free versions. And I think you'd be surprised how far advanced they are these days, and how the parts of your business that they can really help improve efficiency. The other is like, where can you do that experimentation in terms of like finding opportunities to improve efficiency in your business? One area is like low risk areas where you're not reviewing a document where you might miss something, but things like, hey, just help me draft an email to a customer who has just contacted me way too much, right? And just help me frame this email in a way which is polite but defensive, right? Whatever it may be. Start in those small areas of the business and use that as an opportunity to learn. And the last thing I would say is that this is me kind of reading the tea leaves just from where I sit and the kind of products that I have to build. But at the end of the day, almost all of these generative AI solutions depend on accurate, fresh, timely data, which could be the documents that you have in your company. It could be document templates. It could be in the text of regulation. It could be emails that you sent back and forth to the customer where you're coming to a conclusion about something. That's all data which can be used to power some of these products in the future. So maybe not super actionable right now, but I would say organize those assets that you have, because they may be very valuable to you in the future, particularly on the document and templating side. Which I think is a good segue into talking about opportunities. So like areas in which technology can really help our businesses. So the first is that instead of talking about discrete technologies that kind of in isolation and kind of throw names of companies at you, I kind of wanted to approach this from a perspective of like having a goal. Like, why would we even bother thinking about this problem? Like, why would we talk about technology? So the first is, I want to grow my business, right? Like, how can I embrace kind of modern technology and some of the innovations that are occurring to help expand, the scope of my services or attract new customers? So the first thing that I would say is, where can you start to kind of, start this process is in things like marketing automation software and CRM, which practically speaking, if you're not familiar with them, are, technology product software, which allows you, if we're talking about CRM, to kind of build customer contact lists, but most importantly, segment them into say, these are people who, I did a real estate transaction with, or I sold a will to, or maybe they just use me for other kind of notary services, whatever it may be. Maybe they're a new customer, maybe they're a longtime customer. And the reason why you do that is because that segmentation allows you to do different things with them, which is the second point around marketing automation. It allows you to kind of build marketing flows like sending an email or making even a phone call in some cases, or a text message based on those audience segments, those customer segments, based on an event. So practically speaking, what can we do with this information? The first is that I would say, if our goal is to grow our business, I would say leverage these softwares and these analytics tools to create baseline metrics. Maybe that's like number of people that visit your website. Google Analytics is a good, mostly free tool. There are other free alternatives out there that let you do that. It could be, what is the current like average revenue per customer that I have? And you can further, collect information like, how does that relate to their age? What kind of demographic segment are they in? And based off of that kind of underlying measurement that you're doing, you can set an objective, right? Maybe I want to convert more prospects that like land on my website, or like I have an inbound phone call from. Maybe it's, I want to grow the lifetime value of someone who I have a pre-existing customer relationship with and drive repeat business. So if that's your goal, how can technology help you accomplish that goal? So the first thing I would say is like, what I would encourage you to do if you haven't, used some of these tools already is you try to use some of these automation softwares to build a funnel, right? Like a marketing funnel, kind of in the classic, marketing 101 context, with multiple touch points to try to kind of drive these customers to a journey which leads to you growing your business. And I'll give you some tangible examples here. One is maybe during tax season, you have like date-based reminders to your customers, right? Another might be if you meet somebody at a local in-person marketing event, you can drive them to what I call like a digitally addressable platform, right? To a website, to an email, to get their email or like get their phone number for sending text messages. Because then you can add them to your CRM database and reach out to them later. Which, speaking of reaching out, you can then use this as an opportunity to maybe say, like, after you meet somebody, do a personalized outreach based off of like the kind of the opportunities in that software to kind of tailor things to make it more personal to them. Another might be, if you know about, the age of your client's children, you might know when they're going to college, and that might be a good opportunity to reach out to them or schedule an automated reach out to have a discussion about getting a will. Or maybe it's like in your referral network, a realtor or somebody like that. You can have seasonal reminders about like, hey, this is the scope of services that I have. Here's some new, marketing that I wrote to help you think about my services or educate your customers on, what they can do with us, as an example. So I think that if the context of can you grow your business, I hope these are tangible examples about how you can use some of these particular software tools to help you. And the other one I want to frame up is another way of using technology is to increase the efficiency of your business. So I think here there's a whole host of software tools and kind of different kind of technologies that you could kind of bucket into this category of helping you grow efficiency. Generative AI is certainly one of which I'll touch on, but the other is a kind of a slurry of other kind of modern practice management tools. So again, same exact pattern. I would encourage you to like measure your business, right? Have metrics that help you identify, if we're talking about efficiency here, like what is the largest time drain or energy suck for your business, and estimate and find a baseline for it. That could be, how much time do I spend responding to email? It could be, how much time does it take me to close a matter if we're talking about conveyancing? And then use that to set an objective, right? Maybe you want to increase your throughput, like the efficiency, how quickly you can complete matters across your staff. Maybe it's I want to decrease the amount of time I spend replying to customer emails because they just suck up too much of my time. And based off of that, find software tools which help you directly affect that outcome. So an example here would be use online scheduling software to reduce the amount of back and forth email that you have to do to find times that work for talking to a customer. Another would be use online intake or identity verification software to reduce the amount of admin and data entry you have to do for opening up, a new matter, say for like, a will or for conveyancing. Speaking of conveyancing, I think that like cloud conveyancing solutions have like a lot of integrations built into them these days, which allow you to kind of save time. I say that not just because I work for a company that builds those, but it's a general point, not just in conveyancing, but even in the will space. For Gen AI, I think this is a really neat one for many of you because you can use it to do things which ordinarily is pretty frustrating and things we don't really like to do. I really don't like marketing, despite the fact that I worked in that space for a long time. But you can use it to write things like emails. To write things like newsletters that you can send out on a weekly basis. You can use it to create content marketing about the latest things happening, in your neck of the woods and how it relates to your customers, and use that to reduce the amount of like admin work that you may not even be doing from a marketing perspective, but it certainly helps build your business, and it saves you time. And the last thing I'd say is that you can use a lot of these tools to kind of do things like email automation. Say, for example, you're trying to chase down a counterparty for closing out a file. You could use these to kind of like not have to waste your staff's time to do some of that work. These softwares can do it for you. So again, this is not talking about a bunch of AI everywhere. It's really meant to be tangible things that you can employ today for your practice to help use technology to improve your efficiency or grow your business. So I think I hit my 30 minutes exactly, so we have time for Q&A. But just to kind of talk about key takeaways as we kind of move into it. The first is that I think all of us should try to experiment with some of these kind of like AI and like modern software tools to try to improve the efficiency of our practices. I think these are things which they exist right now. They're not on the horizon. There's things we can certainly start like investing in and employing today. Just experiment, right? Just try them. There's plenty out there. This is not a sales pitch, so I didn't include many names of those tools, but I think they're easy to find. I'm happy to, answer questions directly about some of them. I think that next is that investing in a digital first experience. This is really helpful for younger demographics, but I think even for older demos, it's important because that's how you build credibility for your business, is in how do I present myself to someone who maybe doesn't even know about notarial services? Like this is the way that you can build that. And then you can drive them into a marketing funnel and then, activate all those other kind of like features of marketing automation software or CRM, which if you choose to invest in them, you get dividends from that. And the very last point is I talked a little bit about, these productized legal services, kind of like, enemies at the gate, so to speak. And I think that this is an opportunity to do what doesn't scale, right? Do what they can't do, which is they're not going to invest in personalizing, and having that personal touch with your customers. Like you can do that. They're not going to invest or have the ability to like localize the advice that they give or the services that they offer to like the region that you practice in. You can do that. So I think that'd be my final takeaway here is like think about these kind of technology across the spectrum of how it can really help your business. Don't just think about it as like things on the horizon. There's things that you can start, working with right now. So with that said, I appreciate your time and happy to take any questions from the audience.
Thanks so much, Nikesh. I have one question here, not completely related, but will Dye & Durham facilitate the import transfer of existing client data from ProSuite or eConvey into Unity? Is that something you can answer now, or is that for another time?
That's a good question. It's off topic, but I certainly can follow up on it. I'm not sure who asked the question, but yeah, I think that there's some cases where for Unity we're doing things like template migration, and I think for some customers, like we're certainly looking into like where it makes sense to help facilitate data migration. I think Unity as a product is something that we're launching later this year, and some customers have access to it from a beta perspective right now. But yeah, happy to have a discussion about where that makes the most sense, although it's kind of orthogonal to today's discussion.
Okay, perfect. I think the just further clarification on that question from Carolyn. Thank you for clarifying. She's stating that it relates to her CRM going forward. I think that's where the question came from with this piece. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, we can definitely follow up.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn, for clarifying that. Any other questions, notaries? Just pop them in the Q&A box. Tara, I think your hand's raised, but if you did have a question, if you could pop it into the Q&A, that would be great. I don't see any other questions. So usually when I start to wrap it up and thank you, then I get a couple more questions, but I'll just ask you, Nikesh or Marcy, if you have any final words before we do wrap it up.
Not on my end. I think that like, I hope that the takeaway here is like, again, I try to avoid throwing a bunch of like technology buzzwords everywhere and try to make this more grounded in like things that are practical. If people want to talk about technology buzzwords, love talking about that. Happy to do it, over drinks at some point in time. But yeah, I hope that this is, actionable things that, you all can kind of take away and start working with right now. Some of this, I know many, notary practices definitely do already. So some of this is maybe a little bit, well-trodden path. But for some of you, I think maybe especially in the areas around like content marketing and marketing automation and like using Gen AI to kind of grow your business, that might be new. And I think that this is a kind of like low-hanging fruit, so to speak, for increasing your business.
Thank you. Marcy, any words from you?
No words of wisdom from me. No, I found Nikesh's presentation very interesting. Learned a lot of stuff.
Thanks for being here to help with any questions or anything. And notaries, I know Keith Moore couldn't be here today, but he is your contact, I believe. So any questions can be directed through Keith as well. And I'll just wrap it up. Notaries, I will be doing the draw. So one of you will be winning 2 tickets to the BC Lions game on October 17th. So expect that in one of your inboxes this afternoon. Thank you, Nikesh. Thank you, Marcy. And thank you
Thank
for everything
you.
Dye & Durham does. Have a
Thank you.
wonderful afternoon. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.